This video is brought to you by Ground News. So Shane Gillis recently hosted SNL.
If you don't know who I am, please don't Google that. It's fine. Don't even worry about it.
And this was surprising to some, as in 2019, Gillis had been cast on SNL and then was fired within the week when a video emerged of him using anti-Asian and homophobic slurs on his podcast. Some people hate him for his past behavior, like his tendency to chat with Nazis. Meanwhile, others, like the New York Times, praised his recent special. While Shane Gillis' SNL monologue was fairly tame.
You don't think that's funny to bring my dad here to make fun of him for being a girls' high school basketball coach? All right. I thought it was great. Never mind.
The two opposing camps took to Twitter, or X, after the show to express either their outrage or defense of Gillis, who again had the most cantaloupe of performances. Now, people's reactions felt weirdly polarized for someone who told jokes about dancing with his mom in the car to Shania Twain.
I thought she was cool. I would listen to her music. I'd be like, bam, bam, ba-dam, bam, bam, bam. Let's go, girls.
But these days, polarized reactions to comedy have become the norm. Comedy has historically been used to bring people together, but lately it's turned into a culture war, and it seems like both sides are losing. It feels like comedy is in crisis and no one can agree on what's funny anymore. Now, some will say the Gen Zers who are quick to cancel someone for an offensive joke, that they're the ones killing comedy. Now, others insist that subversive humor, like jokes that poke fun at marginalized groups, is not and has never been funny. Okay, so what's going on here? Are Americans too sensitive? Have young people lost their sense of humor? And why does it feel like no one can take a joke these days?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Okay, so as we're talking about in this video, our ability to understand humor has to do with our ability to understand the world, and understanding world events is getting really tough these days. And that's why I've been using Ground News. Now, Ground News is a website and an app created to give readers a transparent way to read the news. With access to over 50,000 news sources across the political spectrum, it allows you to compare headlines, see who owns the source, and where the bias leans per article, giving you the complete overview of the story. Today, I was interested in reading about the House bill that could ban TikTok. It's something I care about as both someone who consumes a lot of comedy and content on TikTok and someone that just has a vested interest in digital media. Ground News is showing me it's been covered by 389 sources. And out of those news sources, it's showing me that 28% lean left and 23% lean right, which in this case means that the bias distribution is pretty even. And as I scroll down, I can see every article about this topic, and there's tags next to them, which show me the political bias, the reliability, and ownership of the source. Best of all, you can just compare the headlines, which give you a sense of how bias might influence the framing. One of my favorite features of Ground News is the blind spot feed, which highlights stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. When I clicked that, one of the things I got was a story that's underreported. On the left is that Taco Bell is closing most of their Oakland dining rooms due to safety concerns. And this feature is fully unlocked with the Vantage plan. Now, I've been using Ground News to help me stay informed on diverse perspectives. What they're doing is crucial because it empowers individuals to make informed decisions by providing comprehensive coverage and facilitating comparison between different viewpoints. So check out the link in the description or go to ground.news/Wisecrack and subscribe to get yourself 40% off unlimited access through the Vantage plan, which works out to about $5 a month. When you subscribe, you're not only supporting us, you're also supporting an independent platform trying to make the news more transparent. Now, let's get back to the show. Well, to answer this question, let's first discuss the social function of comedy. Now, you might be asking, isn't comedy just supposed to be, funny?
She told me when it happened, she tried to manually turn it down on the speaker, but because I was hitting up, it just looked like I was bullying her with porn.
And of course it is. If comedy isn't landing, then you're just being preachy.
I am incorrectly female. I'm incorrect. And that is a punishable offense.
Or maybe being a dick.
Don't not give me an answer, okay? It's not very professional.
But just like water is supposed to be wet, it's wet for a reason. And we're interested in talking about precisely why comedy works. And if you want to talk about if that metaphor about water worked, let me know in the comments and we can workshop it. Molière, a 17th century playwright, believed the purpose of comedy, specifically comedic satire, is to correct men's vices. Molière said that to correct men by amusing them, I believe that in my occupation I could do nothing better than attack the vices of my age by making them ridiculous. Molière did this with his play Tartuffe, which was banned for making fun of the Catholic Church. Yeah, it's not a new thing that the Catholic Church struggles to take a joke.
As a wise pastor said Sunday last, parties are towers of Babylon. Babylon. Because the guests all babble on.
Molière believed that audiences signal their understanding or acknowledgement of the truth of a joke with laughter. Take Tina Fey's impression of Sarah Palin.
Well, there were some funny moments. For instance, I had 15 to 20 false alarms where I thought I saw Osama bin Laden driving a taxi.
It killed because something about it resonated as true. Namely, Sarah Palin appeared to have no idea what she was doing. According to Molière, comedy in the form of satire is more powerful than criticism because it exposes vices to public laughter.
You want to make some money here? Then read the script with the white boys.
You know, like how Pennywise loses its power when kids start giggling at him. A scholar, Avner Ziv, writes that modern sophisticated satire does a lot of heavy lifting, from breaking taboos to holding those in power to account. Ziv says comedy and satire possess a common denominator in that both try to change or reform society by means of humor. The two forms together constitute the best illustration there is of the social function of humor. For example,
we do have real cars on my street. I'm not sure what a fake car would be. Exactly.
Or consider Stephen Colbert's appearance at a congressional hearing, where he poked fun of politicians by veering farther to the right than anyone else in the room.
I don't want a tomato picked by a Mexican. I want it picked by an American, then sliced by a Guatemalan, and served by a Venezuelan in a spa where a Chilean gives me a Brazilian.
Colbert was asked to leave the hearing because he was making people feel like fools. Now, activist and comedian Josie Long would argue that was a sign he was doing his job. Long says the role of satirical humor is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. But beyond satire, comedy more generally has an even broader social function. Cognitive neuroscientist Scott Weems says, "My first thought when I think about humor is it's a great way for us to have evolved so we don't have to hit each other with sticks. And we all use humor to de-escalate tense situations."
The great John only meant to cut my meat for me.
Your meat! Is bloody tough.
Like, you're in the middle of an argument with your partner and it's not going well, but then you figure out how to make a really good fart joke and everyone smiles and laughs and you're in love again, and it's great. More than that, humor is used as a form of psychological processing that helps us cope with the darker, more confusing parts of life. Otherwise known as gallows humor, dark jokes help ease tension, build morale, and make us feel more connected to people who are also suffering. I learned this as a kid because at funerals, my dad would often make jokes, and at first I was like, is my dad a psychopath? But it's actually very helpful. So, if you have any good funeral jokes, share them, because we're all gonna need them, because everyone dies. And this is why we laugh in response to tragic events that shouldn't be funny at all, like how New Yorkers joke about September 11th way more than anyone else.
But you know what ranked least in satisfaction? 9/11 Airlines. What a terrible name for an airline. It reminds me of that tragedy.
So New Yorkers, give us your best jokes in the comments, but don't if you're not from New York, and we can tell. On a more fundamental level, comedy is how we communicate the truth of our personal experiences. Comedian and political commentator John Fugelsang explains, humor validates shared experiences, gets us to think more flexibly, and reframe situations in this shared experience we call life. For example, shows like Insecure and Rami give audiences insight to modern Black and Muslim experiences, using comedy to expand people's perspectives and thus their empathy. So, generally speaking, humor functions as a social lubricant that connects us. It helps us cope with this wild world we live in, speak truth to power, and gives us a voice and audience, so long as we're entertaining. Okay, so now that we sort of understand what a joke can do, let's explore why and when jokes stop being funny. Most obviously, and per Molière, fools do not wish to be ridiculed. When a person is the butt of a joke or feels like their morality has been questioned, they close up and accuse comics of no longer being funny. Or in the case of Donald Trump, they tweet out their live review of Jimmy Kimmel's Oscar monologue. Alternatively, someone might be offended by a joke because it denigrates a certain group of people, more in the spirit of cruelty than truth. Like when people make bald jokes and you think you're being funny, but I don't think it's very funny, you know, and if I'm not laughing, I don't think your bald joke is good. For example, racist jokes often reflect and normalize racist attitudes, making their punchlines for some feel like an actual threat. Now, to those of you who might say, yeah, but comedians are supposed to push boundaries and be offensive, which is fair, let's listen to the king of dark comedy, Anthony Jeselnik.
Well, this is a quote attributed to Andy Warhol that I love. It's just, art is getting away with it. You know, if you put out a special and everyone's pissed, like, you didn't get away with it. You know, you need to make everyone laugh that they're like, yeah, he talked about some fucked up stuff, but we're all happy. That's art. Otherwise, you're just a troll.
Okay, so maybe instead of blaming an audience for not laughing, comedians should, you know, workshop their jokes until they're actually funny. But today, it seems like everyone is offended all the time, right? Millennials, well, we're tired of jokes about avocado toast. The boomers are upset over okay boomer memes when they can pull them up on the phone. And Gen Z is offended by a lot of things. So have we just sort of lost our collective sense of humor? The short answer is yes and no. But to understand why, we got to take a look at how the comedy landscape has changed in recent years. As we know, comedy thrives when it's hitting on something that we believe to be true, whether about people in power or the smell of big stinky farts. Now, this makes it feel subversive and countercultural and edgy, which is good. I like that. And these qualities traditionally made comedy a tool that was primarily used by the more progressive side of the political spectrum, which we see by late night talk show hosts. Though, as we've mentioned in the past, just because comedy feels subversive or edgy to someone doesn't necessarily mean it's actually questioning systems of power. So check out our past videos critiquing late night comedy for more on that. But lately, we've seen a rise in right-wing comedy, which we also have a video about, which, given what we know about comedy, seems like a reasonable thing to happen when we're under a Democratic president. And it's no coincidence that right now Shane Gillis has one of the most popular Patreons on the planet. Much more popular than ours, but if you want to change that, there's a link in the description. As we've discussed in a previous video, right-leaning comedy is all over YouTube. And much like Colbert purposely pushing buttons during the Bush era, these comedians are not afraid to, and are even eager to, offend. It just looks different today, right? There's a lot more slurs or dicey jokes about gender identity to push back against a liberal-leaning political sensibility that hates free speech.
Oh yeah, because you know it's been long overdue a challenge, the trans community. Oh, they've had their guard down for too long, if you ask me.
But comedy is back as soon as Elon took over X. It's so funny on that website now. It's so funny. And yet we still disagree on what's funny. And this might be because some comedy is always reflecting something about reality.
When he became leader of Germany, Adolf Hitler was a funny-looking character with silly hair, a bit like Boris Johnson.
So when we disagree on the nature of social and political reality, we're gonna find different things funny. In other words, one man's Rathaniel is another man's, is it Bert Kreischer? I don't know how to say his name right, and I'm not gonna learn. But put a shirt on, Bert. Some of this is a function of how we consume media. You know, we're sequestered in our own disparate algorithmic social media echo chambers, and this could really bring the whole notion of reality into question. Or as researcher Nico Pekovic explains, repeated exposure to the same sorts of content, comedy included, create feedback loops, which reinforce a user's pre-existing preferences, diminishing their exposure to a diverse range of cultural offerings and denying art, aesthetics, and culture of its confrontational societal role. If the point of comedy is to challenge us, well then constantly being served jokes that confirm rather than question our worldview does the opposite. At the same time, the repetitive nature of social media algorithms tend to favor content that falls in line with certain ideological lanes. And so much of our comedy consumption, from what we get served on TikTok to what we get recommended on Netflix, is now dictated by algorithms. So maybe it's no surprise that comedy, much like our country, has become more divisive and bifurcated than ever. Rather than having a consistent baseline, at least in the US, it feels like we're operating in at least two different realities. I feel this sometimes because all friends send me a comedy video because they think I'm gonna like it, but then I don't like it. But then I send them, you know, Conor O'Malley's Irish Mob video.
No more touchscreens, no more Golden Globes, just the Irish Mob.
and they say to me things like, why do you think that's funny? Why are you like this, you know? Or it's like last week on stream, I recommended that people watch Freddy Got Fingered on the Criterion channel, and a few of you were not happy with me. And because comedy pokes fun at reality, or what we agree is true, this can make it more confusing and more offensive if a comedian appears to operate outside your subjective reality. The scholar Teresa Prados Torreira agrees, arguing that Last Week Tonight and more right-wing shows like Gutfeld are based in two intrinsically different versions of reality. Think of it this way, Fox News is sort of like the DCEU and CNN is like the MCU. Both have their own storylines and only people who follow them understand all of the inside jokes. Prados Torreira says, if we can no longer agree on what's true, then we won't be able to agree on what's funny either. But even if we might assume that liberal and conservative beliefs are diametrically opposed, their comedy actually mirrors each other in an interesting way. Specifically, in the grand American tradition, each side likes to think of themselves as the underdog. So we all think that the comedy that we like is the one that's mocking the oppressive elites on the other side. We just disagree on who those oppressive elites are. According to this theory then, left-wing and right-wing comics are honestly just telling the same kinds of jokes, but they're doing so from within their two different and distinct realities. That explains at least some of the humor disconnect. The internet, beyond running on algorithms, has another role in distorting our notion of reality and changing the landscape of comedy. Now, in the past, comedians appearing on major channels like HBO or Fox had to have their jokes vetted. Now, because any rando can post on the internet, all lines have disappeared. Now, in some ways, this is a good thing because people who have not traditionally been given a voice on major networks can now be heard.
If you put a dog shit into Sonic and Knuckles, you get Sonic 2006, the worst Sonic game ever made.
This also means there are more people reacting to what they think is funny and not funny.
No, they're saying Boo Earns, Boo Earns.
And edgier comedians have not gone anywhere. And now they have podcasts, really popular podcasts. And the person who is the loudest and gets the most TikTok followers, well, they're gonna get a Netflix special, not because they're necessarily good at comedy, but because their work facilitates the most views. This is what happened with that guy, Matt Rife, who I don't know a lot about, but I know that Anthony Jeselnik says that he sucks. Also, in total fairness to comedy, it's like this in every type of media and art these days.
And there goes our only way out. We are now stranded for the next 7 days.
Now, this incentivizes comedians to take the most offensive stance on issues just for the clicks. Oh, and be sure to check out my next video where I'm gonna rank all the religions on a scale from stank to dank. It's gonna be fun. Because these shock value comedians are rewarded with free publicity, both by people who think they're funny and those who think they're despicable, it makes us feel even more polarized and disconnected from actual reality. And the sort of fun and sick irony here is that often these clips get reposted more by those who hate them than by those who like them. Like every Shane Gillis clip I've ever seen on Twitter has been by some left-leaning person who's mad about Shane Gillis. And that's the only reason I know who he is, because of those people. It's just like, post stuff you like. The internet's comedy scene is like a funhouse mirror horror show. Everything is distorted to suck even more. And this online environment also makes it harder to pick up on subtext, which is vital to understanding much of comedy. Now, jokes are much more easily misinterpreted, especially because they're often shared out of context. Let me know in the comments the last time you accidentally shared a satirical article thinking it was true. The last thing I shared was a screenshot of a post of Jordan Peterson attacking Elmo in the Islamic world, and it wasn't real. But I believed it was real because it seems like something he would do. But I fact-checked and I stopped sharing it. Okay, so we're living in a comedy world where we fundamentally disagree on who the man is and what the counterculture is, and thus on what is funny. And no wonder it feels like more jokes are bombing harder than, we're not making it a 9/11 joke. With competing narratives of what's true and what's real, it's no surprise that opposing groups are offended by the other's humor. And this all raises an even bigger question, because what happens when we can't joke around with the people we disagree with? American political stratification and bifurcation don't just impact how we view politics or the economy. They can also impact our ability to share humor. And if we can't even agree on what's funny, well then what's to stop this polarization problem from infecting all other aspects of society? And what's to stop comedy from making everything worse? Humor researcher Thomas Ford explains that comedy goes bad when it switches from being affiliative, or telling jokes and funny stories to entertain people without putting them down, to aggressive, or making fun of people at their expense. disparaging comedy, which ridicules a specific group, creates and reinforces prejudice, thereby throwing gasoline onto the already raging bonfire of division. Now, research suggests that when you make fun of a particular group, it might make like-minded people feel closer to you, but it also makes the group you're making fun of band closer together. This is especially true of instances when the group feels like their values are under attack. In other words, the jokes that you make about Swifties or Marvel fans only make their affiliation with those things and their fellow fans stronger. Now, of course, when those disparaging jokes are, say, calling Trump supporters stupid or racist or calling liberal men cucks, the consequences run deeper than a fight about whether a pop star should get to watch football in public. When we share disparaging humor, we exacerbate division by agreeing that it's okay to delegitimize a certain group or ideology. This further entrenches us in our views and highlights our differences rather than celebrating what we have in common. Like how we all talk to dogs like they're the best little guys, because they are. Now, we're not saying that late night hosts should ease up on people who are trying to undermine democracy, or that satirical humor isn't an important and powerful tool for changing perspectives and thus society.
By the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
But it is worth acknowledging that there are real consequences when you roast an entire group of people. Now, unfortunately, some people can only have an audience and can only maintain that audience by using humor irresponsibly. And then by insisting that people who don't like it just can't take a joke, even when that joke is making prejudice seem chill. Ironically, one study found that people with higher levels of prejudice are more likely to misinterpret subversive humor, i.e. the person most likely to tell you that something was just a joke is least likely to be in on the joke.
My mom and dad once made me smoke an entire pack of cigarettes. An entire pack of cigarettes in one sitting, just to teach me an important lesson about brand loyalty.
Humor in the absence of empathy also encourages apathy and cynicism in other aspects of our lives. And this has certainly bled into politics, with many fearing voters will sit out the upcoming 2024 election. Guys, I'm excited. It's our first reboot election. We're running 2020 back. 2020 was such a good year. We were just like, let's do that one again. Remember, everything that happened in 2020 was all bad. Now, you don't have to have watched every single one of our more depressing videos to know that a myriad of tough realities, from climate change to a loneliness epidemic, have a lot of us feeling pretty hopeless. Simply put, we could all really use a laugh. Maybe not at each other, but with each other.
But now I'm embarrassed, right? Because I don't want to go back and be the guy ordering more sausage rolls. So what I do is I put on a disguise.
Otherwise, we're looking at a pretty bleak, unfunny future. Now, humor is a double-edged sword that can both unite and divide us. But because comedy is increasingly doing the latter, it's more important than ever to take it seriously. But not so seriously that we call comedians the new philosophers, a trend that we talked about in a recent video. You can check that out if you're curious. But that said, for his part, humor researcher Thomas Ford has hope. He suggests that using disparaging humor to make fun of our divisions themselves can subvert rather than intensify them.
What I'm thinking of doing is coming out with a line of hate crime-proof hijabs that my mom can wear. Completely hate crime-proof, okay? First one, I'm thinking standard, just Confederate flag hijab. Because listen, that's gonna short circuit, but nobody's gonna know what to do.
Leading us to focus more on what we have in common, like the fact that every family Thanksgiving seems to end in a pointless political showdown. But hey, if you guys need some fuel for your family's next political showdown, I want to tell you to check out a new podcast. It's called Scumbags of History. Our parent company co-produced it. It stars comedians and hosts Brittany Schmidt and Mateen Stewart, and they regale you with the less savory side of revered historical figures like Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and Dr. Seuss. This idea actually came from Amanda Shurker, one of the brains behind Wisecrack, and I think you guys would like it. I actually interviewed the two hosts on Wisecrack Live this week, so you can check that out as well. But what do you all think? Humor got us into this mess. Do you think it can help get us out? Is it possible for us to laugh on the same plane of reality again? Or are we better off sticking to our own little groups with our own little inside jokes? Let me know the answers to that, but also share something in the comments that you think is funny that people should watch. I'm gonna say Freddy Got Fingered. It's a movie that's now on Criterion Channel. It's nuts. It's nuts. But it's a movie I've liked since I was a teen or maybe a preteen. So check that out. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the channel. If you want to join up, it really helps us a lot. Patronages start at $1. There's a link in the description. But thanks for watching, sharing, all those sorts of things. It means a whole lot to us. And, we'll see you next time. Hopefully between now and then, you find some stuff to laugh at.